What if your next team workshop delivered the results you hoped for? What if everyone believed that the working session was a valuable use of their time and felt inspired to take action? My name is Miriam Hatness, and it is my mission to help you to deliver workshops that work. Today with me on the show is Alison Coward. She's the founder of Bracket. She is a strategist, trainer, workshop facilitator, book author, and keynote speaker. We're meeting today in London in her co-working space to talk about workshop culture. So stay tuned. Hi, Alison.
Hello. Hi, Miriam. How are you?
I am very well.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm so excited to meet you in person in London. I've been a huge fan of your blog posts.
Oh, thank you.
I've shared them with my LinkedIn community already. And then I could not hold back but just reaching out to you and asking you to come on my show.
It's a pleasure.
Thank you. You're the founder of Bracket.
Mm-hmm.
What's the story behind the name of Bracket, or what is your story as a facilitator?
Yeah, so if I tell you the story of the name of Bracket, that will be the whole podcast. So I'll just start with what Bracket is. Bracket is a consultancy facilitation agency that focuses on team collaboration. Mm-hmm. So one of the things that I do is I just help teams work better together. Mm-hmm. And a lot of that takes place through workshop facilitation. It's evolved into a company that does workshop facilitation, mm-hmm. training in how to facilitate great workshops, and training on team culture and team effectiveness and productivity and creativity. But when I started, it was very different. I have a background in the creative industries, and I used to do a lot of work with individual creative practitioners like artists and designers and illustrators and photographers, helping them to become self-employed and to become successful freelancers. And I just got very interested in what I could do as someone that provided business support to the creative sector, like how to make it, how to create new ways of helping them develop their businesses. And I did an MA. Mm-hmm. The MA was called Enterprise and Management for the Creative Arts. And through lots of reading and research, I just really got into what the creative industries were about and found that collaboration and networks were such a massive part of the sector. And I thought, well, this is great that a lot of the work that I do doesn't actually focus on bringing creatives together. So is there something out there that could do this? And at the same time, I mean, my MA was like 15 years ago. At the same time, we were starting to get the murmurings of online collaboration tools. Mm-hmm. So just this kind of idea that actually you didn't need to be in the same room to collaborate. You had these kind of platforms that would help people stay on track, stay productive, stay communicating, and you could be located anywhere. And I was like, this is great, because you've got all these individual practitioners that are based in various parts of the country, even the world. And, you know, what if we use these tools to bring them together on projects that they could collaborate and really kind of build multidisciplinary teams and access larger projects? So actually that was the original idea of Bracket, like bringing together teams of creatives into multidisciplinary teams and helping them to use their creativity to support more corporate-based clients, so like marketing campaigns or product development ideas. And actually the online side of that, I knew that would take a while to get going. So I actually started just doing it in person. And every time I got a project in from a client, I would pick out my team of freelancers from my network. I had quite a big network of freelancers, and I would get them together in a room. And actually the room we're sitting in is probably one of the first rooms that I used to do that, which is all quite
good
nostalgic.
Back.
And when I brought everyone together, I would facilitate, because I wasn't a creative producer. I would be the person that would plan out what we had to discuss and how we would work together to do that. So I was facilitating, but I didn't realise that that's what I was doing. And people gradually started saying to me, Alison, you're quite good at that. I've got a team that could really use those services, or I know someone that could really use what you're doing. And that's kind of switched my journey into becoming an official facilitator, really. So I started off doing it because it felt like an essential thing to do if I wanted to bring people together. And particularly people that had their own expertise and were very talented. You know, it wasn't about managing them and telling them what to do. It was about creating a space for them to generate ideas and create a way of working together that would bring out everyone's skills. And for me, that was facilitation, even though I didn't realise it was facilitation.
Yeah, it's a
at the
beautiful
time.
definition, actually, of facilitation, to provide the space.
Right.
And today you're mostly working with business teams, as far as I understand. What did you learn from this phase of working with creatives or being a creative yourself that you might still use today in the business sphere?
All the principles. I mean, the big thing for me is that these people that I was bringing together, they all were super talented and they were all experts in their own role. And bringing them together into a team would create a new dynamic. And as I said, my role as a facilitator wasn't to tell them how to do their jobs. It was to create the environment for them to be their most creative and for them to do their work in the best way that they could, but together. And for me, all of those principles apply to the business world. You know, businesses need more creativity. They want more creativity and innovation. The way that I see that happening is by creating the same environment that you would with a team of creators. Because again, everyone in a business team are experts in what they do. You know, if you want to encourage creativity, you need to provide that autonomy, that freedom, that flexibility. And that for me was, you know, an essential, it was a non-negotiable when I was working with creative practitioners, because they could choose to come into the project or they didn't. And for me, I feel that that's what businesses need to do more of.
And are they aware of that? Because creativity is a buzzword. We talked before pressing the record button, we talked about buzzwords. All the team facilitation today is about creativity, and that you need to get teams and management teams to be more creative. So what's your take on that? I see you smiling.
Yeah, so it's for me, it's a balance. Like, you know, creativity is needed. For me, I think people have ideas, and people have a lot of ideas. It may be that they're not in a environment where they're able to express those ideas, or perhaps they feel that they're not creative enough to express those ideas. But it's always a balance between creativity and productivity. Coming up with the ideas is one part, actually making them happen is the other thing. And I mean, I say this in everything that I do. Everything that I do is a balance between team creativity, team productivity and collaboration.
And how do you get, two questions. So one is, how do you get these teams of people who have maybe the self-limiting belief, oh, I'm not creative, to feel safe enough to explore their creativity without maybe getting into this touchy-feely, silly bit, and then to also translate this creative outcome in something productive, as you call it?
Really good question. I would say the first part is, I mean, there are creativity exercises that you can do, and there's some really great tools out there. As I say, I have a really strong belief that the ideas are there. You just need to find a great way of bringing them out. And that could be as simple as giving people the opportunity to speak up.
How do you do that?
How do I do that? Simple way, and this is a very practical way, Post-it notes. We all know Post-it notes. Giving everyone a stack of Post-it notes before the workshop starts, asking a question and making time for individual thinking. Before you launch into a group discussion, giving everyone just a bit of space to write down their own ideas and thoughts, because everybody has them.
What kind of question would you then ask? Something that is related to the workshop topic itself, or something very general?
I prefer to do exercises that are always kind of loosely related to the workshop topic. Like when we're getting into the work, I personally find it more applicable if people can see that their ideas are relating to something.
Yeah. And sorry, I was interrupting you. I got excited about how you get people to get creative. Okay, so that's the first bit. All the ideas are already there, so you just need to incentivize or to give them the space to get them out.
Yeah, and there are some, as I say, there are some exercises which can really enhance those creative thoughts and like help them form those creative thoughts and help people think differently. There are those things, but I do strongly believe that everybody is creative, everybody has those ideas, and everybody has the ability to think creatively. And it just takes someone or a group of people or an environment that enables them to share those ideas.
What are you then doing with these ideas to get to the productive bit?
I guess that's the synthesis part. That's the synthesis. And that's where I feel a facilitator is really useful, because creativity is quite a messy task. When you're kind of in it, it feels messy, it feels chaotic, it feels unstructured. And sometimes you need someone from the outside to help a team spot the patterns and spot the themes that are coming up, or someone that encourages the team to step back and say, right, okay, what are the patterns that are coming up here? So it's like that kind of, there's like a tipping point of creativity, and then some kind of filtering or synthesis to bring it all together. And that's what I see. A workshop goes through those phases of like divergent, convergent thinking. It's almost like a cycle, isn't it? I mean, sometimes you might do divergent, convergent, or you might do divergent, convergent thinking. But that's kind of essentially the process.
I usually start divergent and just get all the ideas out there, as you said, and then maybe finding the one nugget or the one topic that relates most, and then deep dive on that. And then from this point, having another divergence where you can explore this topic further.
Yeah, it depends on the workshop, doesn't it? It depends on one, how long you've got, what the topic is.
What the topic is,
how complex it is.
And whether the workshop really has a goal to achieve. So maybe the team needs to come up with one specific idea or solution, or whether it's more an explorative workshop.
Exactly. And that's the thing before, isn't it? Kind of figuring out exactly what the workshop needs to achieve. Not just going into a workshop and thinking, we're just going to generate ideas, but actually knowing, well, do we need one idea? Do we need a range of ideas? Do we need to decide on one idea? Do we need to prototype an idea? Having those kind of clear goals, whichever one of those is, and then designing the workshop from that.
Yeah. What is usually the time that you tell your clients that they have to take for a workshop? Let's say with one specific goal. Yeah,
so my role in terms of the preparation or the actual workshop?
The actual workshop.
Oh gosh, I mean, that's how long is a piece of string? It really depends. Yeah.
Because in our previous discussion, you mentioned that you have one client, and it's only now after working for over a year with them that they actually agreed to have a full day workshop.
Yeah.
So before, I understand that it was always shorter and that it was always very focused on the outcomes and the results.
Yeah. I think in that particular case, the client wasn't really used to working in this way. So it took some time to introduce them to the format. And for, once they were introduced to the format, they could see the benefit of it. So they wanted to use that format more regularly. And after a while, they were like, right, okay, we're just getting only a certain amount done in these shorter formats. Let's do a proper deep dive.
And when you say format, do you mean workshop?
Workshop format, yeah.
And this actually brings us directly to our topic, right? The workshop culture.
Yes, yeah.
So when you say they weren't used to this format, do you mean that before they only had kind of standard normal meetings or group discussions? Yesterday I read on LinkedIn, group discussions are the most worthless thing, something like that. I'm paraphrasing. So what is the difference between a group discussion, a meeting, and a workshop, according to you?
Well, I can tell you what the difference between a meeting and a workshop is. Like in for me, and this is a traditional, I mean, I think that it's more of a continuum than like a dichotomy. So... And I talk about this in the book. I've got like a nice little table, like a traditional meeting, very much about, it's static, one person speaking at a time. People often go along and they want to get their point across. It's sometimes a bit of a debate. There's usually a few people speaking, and those are the ones that are most senior or the ones that have the most dominating voices. And there's people that are just not engaged at all. For me, a great workshop is all of that turned around the complete opposite. So they're dynamic, people are getting involved at the same time, everyone's involved. It doesn't matter what your role is or how confident you are in speaking, you have an opportunity to put your ideas forward, whether that's through vocally or like written down. And they're just much more dynamic. So I guess a group discussion, might be seen as an unstructured workshop, but I don't know if I'd differentiate between a group discussion and a meet. I don't know.
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah, When I hear group discussion, I think of something unstructured without an agenda.
Yeah.
But
there could be value in that. Like
exactly.
Sometimes people need to just sit there and discuss. I recommended to one of my clients once that they set up a specific meeting where they just get together and vent because they were bringing it into their work meetings and it was making them very unproductive. So I was like, just set up an hour every week where you get together and you just vent about all the things that are bothering you.
And then it's a venting meeting.
Right.
I mean, give it a label, give it its space, and then it's okay to vent as long as you don't use the time of the meeting or the jour fixe or whatsoever to complain all the time. I love that. Are they still doing it?
I think they said they were going to take it to the pub, so I don't know. I'm not sure. Which is probably a better place for it, right?
Absolutely.
Over a beer or a wine.
Yeah, and then you can laugh about it at the end. Nice. Coming back to the workshop culture. So if I understand it correctly, you would then take this more collaborative, integrative, dynamic part. And I would be curious to hear what dynamic means into a meeting. Can we do that?
So it's probably best that I describe what I mean by workshop culture.
Yes.
So the reason I came up with this term is because, I mean, exactly what I mentioned to you before. When I talk about the story of how I developed Bracket, like the core of it was about collaboration. I fell into workshops because I felt that workshops seem to be a great vehicle to support collaboration. It's almost like in a workshop, it's like a mini intense collaborative project. All the things that you see in a workshop, all the things that you want in a team to collaborate anyway. So for me, I was seeing how not only workshops, when I was working with my clients, were having an impact in the room, but done over time, how it was starting to change the way they worked with each other. Especially like I mentioned to you, this client that, you know, I started doing the short workshops and, you know, that was just to introduce them to the format. And they wanted more of that because they were like, oh, we get so much done in these sessions. And then eventually they kind of agreed to a longer deep dive. But what I've seen happening in between is that because of the way that they're interacting in those workshops, it's having an impact on the way that they work outside of the workshops as well, the way that they work generally. They're becoming more collaborative. They're having better conversations. They're bringing more stuff to the surface. So for me, a workshop, it seems a shame. I'm a massive advocate of workshops, but it seems a massive shame to leave all the things that we get from a workshop in a one-day session. Like, why is it that we get to the end of the day and we're like, okay, now we've got to put our suits on and get back to our work?
And then we forget all about it on Monday morning.
And then we forget all about it. But all of the qualities that we see in great workshops are the qualities that we want in our organisations. We want collaboration, we want creativity, we want productivity. We want people to be engaged and motivated and happy about their work and, you know, feeling very positive about what they do and having, you know, critical discussions. Why do we leave that for special events? We should be seeing more of those principles in our organisations. So that's what I call a workshop culture. When you see some of the principles, or you start seeing some of the principles kind of spill over into the broader organisational culture. And that might be through the meetings that a team has, sort of, you know, making some of those meetings perhaps more workshop-like. But it could also be in the way that the team interact with each other, the way that they kind of realise that actually, you know, in that workshop, we all had really great ideas. I didn't realise that we had so many great ideas. So actually they have more faith in each other in terms of brainstorming ideas together. Do you see what I mean? It opens up trust, those kinds of things. So yes, I'm very passionate about the workshop format. At the same time, for me, it's a means to an end. It's not the thing. Yeah. It's a way of getting to a thing that you want to achieve.
I somehow had to think of my mom, who has different dishes for different occasions. And then there are the special Christmas dishes and the special occasion dishes. And at one point she realized that she's getting old, and why not having special dishes every day? Right. So why do we need to keep them for good moments? We can have good moments every day.
Exactly. Yeah, I love that. That's a really nice way of looking at it. Exactly.
It reminds me of that.
Yeah.
I guess it's or you describe the transformation process of this team. So how do you get there to introduce, because you cannot come with a hammer and say, okay, now we have this great project, we have a workshop, we have a brainstorm, and we put our full selves, vulnerable selves on the table.
Yeah.
I can see from your face that this is not the way you're doing it.
Well, I think you have to be really careful, don't you? I guess, you know, if I remember I was working with a client before, and I was doing some workshops with different teams in the organisation, and I set up the room before they came in with like post-it notes and Sharpies on the table and a flip chart. And their faces as they just walked in, they just looked terrified. They were just like, what is going on here? Because they'd never, ever experienced it before. So I had to kind of introduce the format very gently to them. And it was very much about, for me, the kind of a very simple introduction is what I mentioned before. Writing down your thoughts on post-it notes and then sharing and having, rather than maybe there's 6 people around a table and just having a discussion with 6 people, actually breaking that 6 people down into 3 groups of 2 and getting them to talk to each other first and then sharing.
What is it that scares people about the idea of having a workshop?
I don't know in this situation, I don't know if they were scared about the idea of having a workshop. I don't think they knew what to expect from it, because they'd never been in a forum before where they were asked to share their thoughts in that way. So it's very different. It's very different. I mean, if you're a facilitator, the whole post-it note Sharpies, it's like second nature to us. Yeah. But there's still a lot of people out there that aren't in that world that don't work in that way.
Yeah.
So it's just a different way of seeing things.
It's a good reminder to be mindful about that.
Yeah.
True, we tend to ignore. So how did they react?
They loved it.
What part about it?
I think it was very difficult. It took a while for them to warm up. But after a while, it is, I think that kind of forum for people when they haven't had it before becomes very cathartic. Yeah.
You also mentioned before that the way you approached the brainstorming in these specific, rather strategy-oriented workshops. So how would you perform a brainstorm with a group of people who are not used to this concept of creativity and collaboration?
I guess the answer that comes to my mind is really helping them shift their idea of creativity. Because when you say the word creativity to a lot of people, I had this discussion the other day, they're thinking artists, they're thinking drawing, thinking photography, thinking filmmakers. Yeah, and that's where I started my world. So that started my career. But I think it's about showing them where the creativity can be in the work that they do.
I recently had one episode with Roma Stukenberg, and we talked about artistic intelligence, and we had exactly this discussion about the difference between artistic and being creative. And so artistic being drawing, going into an artist's space, whereas creativity, personally to me, is connecting dots. So is to use all the knowledge that you already have, but bringing it into a new format, or to connecting them in a new way so that a new idea is created.
And I think when I'm thinking about the situation that I just spoke at, I'm thinking, it's possible to be, and actually this is something that I'm super passionate about, it's 100% possible to be creative about your work processes, for example. You can be creative about doing a task in a different way. You can be creative, about the way that we meet. Yeah. We can be creative about how we, share ideas. It doesn't have to be creativity in terms of an output. For me, it's a new way of doing things.
Yeah, I like that. And it must not be colorful and pushing boundaries, and you don't have to be pushed out of your comfort zone to be creative.
Exactly. When you've got people that do work that might be very repetitive, then it might be very hard for them to think that, they are creative, but they can look at what they're doing and think, well, actually, is this the most effective, efficient way of me doing this task, and can we change it? And to me, that could be creativity as well. Yeah.
And this is maybe exactly the kind of creativity we want to achieve in the process of facilitating workshops in the business context. So how can we find new ways of doing to get work done more efficiently?
100%. And for me, part of that is making that accessible to everybody within an organisation, not just the managers, like giving people more agency and autonomy over their work so that they can create the ways of working that works best for them and their team in the context that they sit within.
So that the managers become facilitators themselves, basically.
Yeah, so this is very much sort of what I'm talking about with workshop culture. There's, various levels of it in terms of the creativity that comes out in an organisation, but also, how you work with a team to design ways of working that works for that team. And that very process, even though those new ways of working may include new ways of meeting and workshops, actually that process has to be facilitative as well. It's not just, one person saying, right, we need to do this is how we need to work from now on. Actually, it's a way of including the whole team in creating those new insights in how they can work better together.
Yeah. Before we continue the show, let me take a brief moment to thank our sponsor, Session Lab. Are you using Excel or Word to prepare and schedule your workshops? Try something that is designed for facilitators. With an easy-to-use drag-and-drop agenda builder, Session Lab allows you to be free and creative in your workshop process design. Session Lab also comes with an immense built-in library of workshop activities and facilitation techniques to help you to find new inspiration for your sessions. Stop messing with spreadsheets and focus on designing engaging workshops. Try it as sessionlab.com. I wouldn't recommend it if I didn't believe in its value myself. Do you have some ground rules that would go along with what you call workshop culture?
I wouldn't call them ground rules. I guess for me, this is very much about a mindset. I think the first thing is an awareness that it is possible to design the way that you work. And it is possible to change meetings. We've got such a big problem with our meeting culture. I think Doodle have estimated, they did some research at the end of last year, and they estimated that the UK will be wasting £58 billion on unproductive meetings this year. So that is something that's rife for innovation, or rife for change. And it doesn't have to be technology. We kind of overlay a lot of these problems with technology, and sometimes it just comes down to kind of looking at it logically as humans and figuring it out. Mindset. So are there ground rules? No, I don't think there's ground rules. There's a mindset, and definitely part of that mindset is about experimentation and testing things out and trying. So design and experimentation are two kind of key strong aspects of workshop culture. The reason I say that is because that's also, for me, one of my big principles in terms of running workshops as well, in terms of the design of the workshop. A facilitator is not someone that just turns up on the day and does their thing. The facilitation starts right from the minute a workshop is, a team decides they want to do a workshop, then the facilitator starts creating the structure for that workshop based on what the team wants to achieve. And that creation, that's a design process.
Yeah, you wrote a blog post about it that I shared the other day. Brilliant. I will put it in the show notes again.
Thank you.
So what would be the most important thing you have to take into consideration then in the design process to maybe also transform or to bring more workshop culture into a normal meeting, or what we would call a normal meeting?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So there's loads of things coming to my mind at the moment. The first thing is that you don't have to run workshops per se, as in when I'm thinking about a workshop, I'm thinking about the extreme, like a day workshop, in order to start introducing the workshop culture. You can start bringing in principles of workshops into your everyday meetings. So it might be a 10-minute exercise in an existing meeting, a 10-minute workshops type exercise.
What would be this exercise that comes to your mind?
Dot voting, for example. You could do dot voting, you could do affinity mapping.
What is affinity mapping?
Post-it note sorting, sort of grouping, finding themes between, people create ideas on post-it notes, and then you group post-it notes based on the themes that come up.
So you would put in a question that is relevant maybe to the meeting, and then decide and brainstorm as you explained it in the beginning, and then grouping them.
Yeah, so little things like that could be in meetings, like having discussions which separate out divergent and convergent thinking, and just making sure that you go into a meeting with a problem, right? Okay, the first half of the meeting is very much about generating ideas. We're not going to critique them. Second half, we're just going to come up with 5 out of those that we think we want to move forward with. So it's kind of taking those principles of workshops into our meetings.
So maybe not every team might have the resources to hire a facilitator. Do you think that even someone from the team can take the facilitation role?
I think they absolutely should.
Okay.
They absolutely. Yeah, I think that it's, bring in the facilitators for the big stuff, like the away days, because you do, I am very much about kind of democratising this process, but there is definitely value, obviously, in having an outside facilitator for the big things that you do. And the important thing about a facilitator is that they're not involved in the discussion.
Yeah.
So it's not always possible for everybody in a team to be a facilitator because they need to be in a discussion. So you might need to bring an outside facilitator for that. Other than that, you can't bring in a facilitator for every single meeting that you have. But at the same time, having a facilitator is really useful. Yeah. So can you rotate that role around your team? And I think that facilitation skills are super useful for everybody to have because of the way that you start... the skills that you develop as a result of facilitation are very useful in existing within the kinds of organisations that we're in now, these kind of creative, chaotic, fast-moving, complex organisations. That's almost what happens in a workshop. They are chaotic and they're fast-moving and they're complex and there's lots of moving parts. So if you know how to kind of exist within those kinds of environments, then it's also, again, going to spill over into the work that you do.
And I think you gain a totally new perspective when you zoom out of the meeting. I see so many benefits actually to just allocate some people sitting in the meeting to the role of a facilitator once in a while, because you get some distance, you learn to listen, to
ask great questions. You get to pull ideas together and spot the connections. And I think there's so much.
Do you do check-ins?
Yeah, I love check-ins. Yeah, it's actually one of the things that I'm like recommending left, right, and centre at the moment. Yeah. I do check-ins in meetings, and actually that's again one of the things that I sort of recommend to teams. If they're going to do anything, start with that, because it's such a simple device, a simple tool. Can take no longer than 5 minutes, and it can really change the way that a team interacts with each other.
Totally, and it helps the team just to be mentally present and to, find focus. So what is your favorite check-in exercise?
Oh, there's so many, and I change them. I don't know. I think teams have to be careful with them. Like, I think if you've never done a check-in before, you can't go straight into... kind of getting people to share their deepest, darkest secrets. But you can start with something like, what's your most memorable moment of last week? Yeah. Or what are you most looking forward to this week? And then as you do them more frequently, you can start building into... what's that academic who did that list of 36 questions? Is it Dr. Arthur Aaron, I think? And he did that list of 36 questions. And if you, the idea is if you ask those questions, you sit with somebody and you go through those 36 questions, by the end of it, you've got to know them so well that you could potentially fall in love.
Yeah. It was a New York Times article, I think. Yeah. That went viral.
Yeah, so you can start to kind of gradually go through that list of questions.
Yeah. I recently had a group exercise, so we're meeting. It was quite a large group, and everyone was complaining that they had so much work to do, and they felt a little bit stressed. And then suddenly someone said, "Oh, I went to I exercised yesterday, so everything hurt." And I was like, "Okay, so let's do a stretching exercise." Stretching check-in where everyone stood in a circle and showing one stretching move. Everyone has to do the same stretching and share what's on their mind at the moment. Yeah, it took a little bit longer than expected, but just the laughs we had, and it was easy. It didn't become very personal, but it eased up the atmosphere.
It's like a moment of human connection. That's it. Because I think sometimes we forget when we're going into meetings. We just, we've got so much to do. We've got to get through this. We've got to talk about this. We just go straight into the work, and we forget that we're kind of sitting with a group of humans, group of people that have probably all got stuff on their minds coming to the meeting with exactly that same energy. Oh my God, we've got to get this meeting over because we've got, got so much to do. Actually, like you say, that moment of kind of mindfulness at the beginning and just, I wouldn't say opening up, but I like to call it in a conference last week, I called it like a micro moment of mindfulness.
Nice. Do you believe in mindfulness, taking mindfulness and silence into meetings or workshops?
I haven't done it myself. I don't see why not if the context works, if it's right for the context. I don't think, you say blanketly. I don't think you can say wholly that mindfulness will work for every single situation because there's no one size fits all. But I have got no problem with trying it.
Yeah, maybe if the group is agitated or there are too many emotions or conflict coming up, maybe it might. I haven't experimented with it yet. Yeah. It just popped up in my mind. I had
a really beautiful moment in one of the meetings that I facilitated for a club. It was actually a mini workshop, and I did the check-in with them. And like this group have always, like everybody, they always got loads to do, always stressed. And one person shared a challenge. I think I was like, what's the biggest thing on your mind today? And one person shared a challenge that they were grappling with, which was really immediate, and it was going to really take their attention from the meeting. And the whole group just got in and problem solved and figured it out. And it was just like, poof, like that's not a problem anymore.
Wow. On the other hand, I can imagine that these kind of information can derive the intention of the meeting or the workshop right away. Well, how would you deal with that?
That's where the facilitator, the check-in it's not the meeting, it's part of the session. I mean, I guess, if you're having these regular meetings with your team, then, what comes up, maybe you do have a session where like what comes up is the thing because we've all got our stuff to deal with. This was a particular, facilitated workshop where we had things to get through. So I had to kind of time box it and not let it overtake the meeting. But for me, it was well worth it because this person would have been getting up, walking out on the phone, texting during the session. And we completely got rid of that because they were able to just solve the problem at the beginning.
Earlier you mentioned also talking, always coming back to the story of this one client that started small and now want to have this full day workshop. You said that they got trapped in your way of facilitating these mini workshops. Because they realized that they would get so much done in them. So what is the magic to actually get work done in a workshop?
The planning, I would say. Like really, to get work done in a workshop, you need to know what you need to get done. And then you design the workshop around that. So what is it, this session that we're meeting for, what is the one thing or the few things that we need to get out of it? Like what's the next steps? And then you design backwards from that.
And I totally agree. Sometimes I have the impression that we achieved great results and it's all there and we defined roles and responsibilities and the next steps and deliverables. And then nothing happens. And it's, as a facilitator, it's so easy to take the blame. So I spent a couple of times just wondering what I did wrong. So why couldn't I make it more easy for the client to follow through? Because if then I checked in again and nothing happened, I would feel responsible. And other teams, they call me after a month and say, okay, we did everything that had to be done and now we have a new problem, so it's time to meet again. So what is, according to you, the responsibility of a facilitator?
That's a good question. I personally, whether this is right or wrong, I do personally feel a responsibility to have at the end of the workshop things that people can take forward. It may be that at the end of the workshop, it's that you need another session to pull out those ideas. But, for me, the whole point of a workshop is about moving things forward and taking things to the next step. The last exercise that I'll always do in a workshop is almost kind of around, what's almost like a micro action. What's the thing that's so easy to do that you can't not do it?
I love it.
And then, in fairness, I have, because of that same feeling that you had, I do build in to all of the workshops that I run, follow up with a client because it's really important to me that they feel that they're able to take that momentum forward. And sometimes they need guidance in how to do that, that accountability or, well, what do I do next? Like, I'm trying to get everyone to do this. What would you suggest?
So what is a good timing for you to check back in with your client? How much time would you give them? Yeah,
so I mean, as I say, I build it in. So the initial actions go to the client as soon as possible after the workshop. So literally what the final actions were at the end of the workshop will go to the client the day after, if not the day, if I can do it. Then there's a full write-up that goes a little bit later, and I will get on the phone or have another meeting with the client to kind of go through that stuff to help them process what happened in that workshop.
Yeah. Especially in full day workshops, usually it's after lunch where the energy is just low because we did a lot of work. We got a lot of work done and all the ideas out before lunch. Then we have lunch, and then we have these 3 hours, or at least 2 hours. Between 2 and 4, usually everyone feels like a vegetable. So at one point I thought, okay, maybe it's worthless to do full day workshops anyway. And I still wonder, when we do full day workshops, what can we do to keep the energy up, especially after lunch, without falling into silly games that many feel uncomfortable with?
That's a good question. Again, it's really dependent. I like to try and kind of have some energizers in my pocket. I agree. I find it's really difficult to find good energizers which aren't sort of random, crazy exercises. And I think you've got to be careful who you do those kinds of exercises with as well. I always like, if I'm doing some kind of energizer, I always like to try and relate it to the content in some way. I mean, sometimes an energizer can be as much as kind of, getting people up out of their chairs and doing something, or it could be somehow switching the energy up. So maybe they're sitting around a table, and maybe you kind of get them working in pairs, standing up and doing a quick exercise, like a quick creativity exercise. I'm just trying to think back to some recent ones that I've done, and I can't remember what the energizer, but there is always that time, usually about half an hour after lunch, when I'll make sure that we do something that's different. Just
standing up, walking around.
Something. There'll be some kind of exercise, but something that switches the energy up, because I usually find that it's, not quite straight after lunch, because people are still kind of coming in from sort of having spoken. Sort of 15 minutes to half an hour after lunch, I find that's the time to do the energize. I think if you do it straight after lunch, for me anyway, that time's wasted a little bit. I think if you do it when you can start to see people are going, then you pick them up again. I think that works.
Very good point. Yeah, now that you're saying it, it's so obvious.
Okay.
And still I never thought about doing it. And I like the idea of getting them up the chairs and putting them into pairs.
Yeah.
Because then nobody can actually hide. It's not very uncomfortable, but nobody can hide, and everyone has to participate.
Yeah.
Nice.
Although I would hope to think that I don't do anything that's too painful for anybody.
Yeah.
As I say, I try to somehow relate it to the material if I can.
Yeah. Nice. I like that. Before closing, I would not feel complete. Yeah. Before closing, I would love to hear just a few thoughts about the book you're currently writing. You're writing a new book, right?
I am writing a new book.
Yeah.
Am writing is the operative way of saying it, because it's taking a little bit longer than I'd like it to be.
As always.
Yeah, but it's about workshop culture. It really is. For me, I think that I feel really passionate about this. I think, my passion really is collaboration, and better collaboration within organisations. One, because I think we can't avoid it. It's just the way that it is. And two, because there's so much value in teams collaborating well. And I think that when you say to people, you need to be more collaborative, or build a collaborative team, or build a collaborative organisation, I think people really struggle with what that actually means. So this book for me is kind of like a how-to, and whenever I talk about that link between workshops and culture, it seems to click with people. It's like an accessible way of many people have been, well, not many, but if you've been in a great workshop, you know what it feels like. And if you start to think, right, okay, well, this is what collaboration feels like. All that facilitator did all of these things in the workshop. Actually, what can I take from that to just build into my culture? And that's almost like an access point to better collaboration. So that's what it's all about for me. Sort of, how do you help people translate the principles from workshops into how it can look if they start applying that into the rest of their culture and the kind of the mindset, the principles, the guidelines, some tools to do that.
Yeah. And you mentioned before, I think it wasn't recorded yet, that when you started 10 years ago and you would say, when you tried to describe what you're doing, you said, well, I help teams to collaborate. They would look at you and say, why would they need you for that?
Right.
And this totally changed today. So everyone knows, or everyone asks for help to find better collaboration. So according to you, what changed over the years?
Yeah, so I mean, I say this all the time that, you know, teams have always been around, but they're starting to look different. And that's because of, you know, various influences and the fact that we can't avoid collaboration now. So back then, I think it was much more of a buzzword. I think people could probably sense that collaboration was the way to go, but I think they were saying it, but behind the scenes it might not actually been happening. Whereas now it's almost like there's no choice but to collaborate. We are working in teams, we're moving in and out of teams more frequently, and teams are the way that we get work done. We can't avoid it, and the nature of those teams are changing. You know, we've got remote teams, we've got people, freelancers, and just the way that they look is very different. So it almost feels to me that if we are going to have productive, thriving, healthy, engaged organisations, we also need to do the work in understanding what makes teams work well in this current context, in this current climate.
Also because I think that the work teams or the problems teams are solving today are far more complex than back then.
Right.
Where maybe everything that back then was a task for one person has been automated. So everything that is left is kind of a teamwork.
Exactly.
Just thinking out loud.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm looking forward to your book.
Oh, thank you.
And until then, I will follow your blog, as I'm already doing, and share it with the network.
Thank you.
Before closing, if a listener just woke up after falling asleep after minute 1, what do you want this person to remember?
That through some small changes, they can make a big impact. So by making small changes to perhaps the way they meet and the way they approach teamwork, they can make a big impact.
Like that. Fantastic. And if someone wants to reach out to you, wants to change their meeting culture into a workshop culture, or wants to read your blogs, your book, or get into a conversation, how can they reach you?
Find me online, bracketcreative.co.uk. At me on Twitter, at Alison Coward. Find me on LinkedIn, all of those things.
Perfect. And I will put all of that in the show notes. Thank you, Alison, for your time.
Thank you for having me.
Cheers. Thank you for staying tuned and listening to the show. I appreciate your attention, as I know how busy you are. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe and engage by sharing your comments and thoughts, and visit workshops.work to download the one-page summary. I'm looking forward to seeing you back at the next episode, and I wish you a fruitful day.